So I got this and one more video before I'm done with my seasonal review of the Amazing World of Gumball Season 1. And instead of doing the wheel to decide the next show and season I'll review, I thought it'd be more fair to ask you guys what you want. So on my community tab is a poll of some shows that I've gotten a lot of requests to do a seasonal review on. So make sure you vote on what show you want, because whatever has the most votes by the time I get the last part of the seasonal review out will be the show I'll be doing the next seasonal review on. So make your vote count. Also, don't be afraid to vote on my other poll, because if this result doesn't change in the next few videos, then I'll be doing a list on my favorite angry video game nerd videos, and sometime after that, a list on my favorite nostalgia critic videos. So if you guys really want to see those, or really don't want to see those, then it'll help out a lot if you vote. Anyway, let's continue this seasonal review with the robots. Now, this is another episode I got some warnings about in my last two videos, and boy do I understand why. Hell, even the episode itself gives you a warning when it starts. Okay, but in all fairness, this episode was more like that long title Duck episode from Courage. Whereas, while I admit I don't like it, I also think it's more meant for people with a different sense of humor than me. It's about the robot character Bobbert wishing he was a real boy, and when Gumball and Darwin try to help him out, Bobbert gets carried away and ends up stealing Gumball's life, resulting in an entire episode of Gumball basically suffering for just trying to help a friend out. Now I get what the episode's trying to do. It's a satire of HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it's taking the scenario of a robot turning on its quote-unquote creator and running with it. And while I don't mind the attempt, I think it's one that could have easily been tweaked up a bit to appeal to a lot more people. First off, there are confusing moments, like when the other kids say Bobbert isn't a real boy, and he walks away looking sad. And when Gumball offers to help him out by telling him to be more in touch with his feelings, he asks them to explain to him what feelings are. Yet he apparently must know what feelings are, because he was showing them when he was walking away, clearly feeling dejected. Also, when Bobbert starts stealing Gumball's life, he dresses up as Gumball and everyone falls for his act, even though it's clearly not Gumball. And I don't mind this joke per se, but what I do mind is what they do with Gumball that ends up hurting the joke. First off, Gumball can tell right away that it's Bobbert, whereas all the other characters are totally fooled. Now, I understand this joke for characters like Richard and Darwin, because they're idiots. But other characters like Nicole and Anais, who are supposed to be smart characters, also fall for it. And Gumball is just as much of an idiot as Richard and Darwin, so this joke probably would have worked a lot better if Gumball himself couldn't initially tell it was Bobbert, and he himself thought this was Gumball before realizing, oh, wait, you can't be Gumball, I'm Gumball. But because Gumball can tell right off the bat that it's Bobbert, the other characters like Nicole and Anais feel out of character. And when Gumball's sad moments come by, they feel over the top and unnecessarily cruel. And that's the biggest issue with this episode. Because the situation is not handled that great and it resorts to the cheapest tactic you could do, changing up your character's established personalities so it fits the joke, it makes the episode come off very poorly written. Now for the record, I wouldn't put this episode up there with The Debt or The Laziest, because even though I don't enjoy these unpleasant scenes, and I think they could have easily been tweaked up a bit to be a lot more tolerable, there's still, in my opinion, more to like with this episode. There's a battle at the end that I do find amusing, and I think when Bobbert has his creepy moments, they're an excellent satire of when Hal turns, and really capture the creepy feel of Hal. There is a good episode here, but it's just so weighed down by cheap tactics and poor writing that, sadly, that good episode gets all its potential taken away. And the end result is just an obnoxious and poorly executed satire. System does not compute with this one.
Which one is the real Gumball? The one that's obviously not a robot! Okay. Ow!
And now we have the picnic, and wouldn't you know it, it's bad too. Yeah, much to my surprise, there are back-to-back bad episodes, which I did not expect from the show considering what I've gotten from it so far. It's about Gumball and Darwin going on a field trip with their class and getting lost because they weren't listening, and then doing virtually every wrong thing they could possibly do. That's really it. It's just an entire episode of Gumball and Darwin getting lost and acting like idiots. Well, I guess at least Gumball's more in character in this episode, but he's as much in character with his stupidity as he was in the debt.
You still got the map, right? Of course. I swallowed it, then memorized it. The wind is one clue. Listen.
You're going the wrong way.
It said we're going the right way.
I said wrong way.
Yep, definitely. This is the way.
And there's also, once again, creepy imagery. But unlike the robots' imagery, the imagery in this episode is just terrible. Now, it seems like this episode was made solely for these imageries. It's kind of like the painting where the plot is secondary to showing off how out of control this world, as well as the Wattersons are. Which is funny because you do already get a taste of that in the first few episodes, that it's nice to see it put on full blast and see how crazy over the top it can get. But here it feels very similar to the imagery in that freakout scene from Beavis and Butthead Do America, which you would think would be awesome, but that imagery worked because it was in a small section of the movie. Here, it makes up roughly half of the episode, and it just feels overdone after a while. It eventually starts feeling like Phase Freeze, where you'll either find it creepy because there's so much creepy imagery here, or you'll find it boring because you get sick of the imagery, especially when nothing really entertaining is done with it. And what also brings the episode down is, while it relies on this to make up roughly half of the episode, the other half focuses on poorly written and poorly paced scenes centered around Gumball and Darwin. Like Gumball having a moment of realization for how bleak the situation is, to him very quickly feeling like he's a born survivor. And then a short time later, turning on Darwin because he feels Darwin is weighing him down, but then changing his mind because Darwin saves him less than a minute later. This is another reason the painting works so well. The episode was trying to keep the plot as minimalistic as it could, so it could focus on its actual purpose. But here, it feels like they're trying to stuff in as much plot as they can, yet still keep the plot secondary. And yeah, it's every bit as messy as it sounds. It just feels so poorly written and paced and weighed down by ugly and lazy imagery that I really don't know who this episode is trying to appeal to. Frankly, this episode is no picnic.
I'm a born survivor! See, I survived!
And next we have the Goons, and I swear to God this show better not make a three-peat. There's too much potential behind this show to make 3 straight bad episodes. Well, this one is about Anais wanting to stop being smart and try being dumb like her father and brothers for a day, which actually already is promising. I tend to enjoy episodes that have characters trying things a bit out of their environment for an episode, so long as there's a legit reason behind it so it doesn't feel too out of character. But Anais starts hogging time with Richard and Darwin, which makes Gumball jealous, and as a result, he sets up a dumb race. Okay, well, first thing I want to talk about is the opening scene, which involves Gumball, Darwin, and Richard all playing with their asses. Wow, that sounded horrible!
You kiss your mother with that mouth?
I'm sorry, sometimes I speak without thinking. Just show the scene. I can't make it sound as innocent as it actually is.
Get off my lawn, Watterson!
But why, Mr. Robinson?
Don't be so cheeky!
Now, first off, this scene is immature and stupid, but It's also very charming. Even the jokes, which are some of the easiest jokes you can make, have such an innocent, family-centered charm to them that it's really hard not to enjoy it. But sadly, this episode is still weighed down by lazy writing. Like when Gumball and Darwin try to teach Anais the language of dumb, but it's just nothing but this.
Dumb, dumb, dum dum dum, dum 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 dum.
Luckily that scene isn't too long, so it's easier to look past. What's not easy to look past, though, is Gumball's transition from enjoying his sister's dumbness to hating it. It's forced, it's contrived, and you can tell it was shortened up because they wanted to spend as much time as possible on this dumb race. Which, I mean, I won't lie, it is enjoyable in some ways, but even it makes no sense. They don't even really go over the real significance of it.
Everyone has to wear a blindfold and run as fast as they can. The person who gets the furthest is officially the dumbest.
How? Wouldn't being able to navigate through this obstacle-filled race blindfolded prove you're actually the least dumb? And this is where I get confused with the way this episode is written. I don't know if this is intentionally supposed to be as dumb as possible, because it fits the episode's topic of dumbness. Kinda like how I couldn't tell if the laziest was actually supposed to be as lazily written as possible to fit the topic of laziness. Or if they really were trying to make a coherent episode. And even if it is written this way as some kind of hidden joke about dumbness, I can't say that automatically makes it a good episode. Just like I wouldn't say a stupid Adam Sandler movie would automatically be good just because it knows it's stupid. And frankly, I feel this staff is too talented to resort to making a dumb episode and trying to pass it off as okay because it at least knows it's dumb. But with all that said, I still wouldn't call this a bad episode, but I would call it an episode with a lot of wasted potential. And still, that's unfortunate for a show like this. But hey, on the plus side, at least this episode wasn't dumb enough to make it a three-peat.
Should we just hug?
Yeah, okay.
And now we move on to the secret, and finally, it looks like this season is getting back on track. This is more what I would expect from Gumball, at least from the first season, because this, for the most part, is a really simplistic episode. It's about Gumball and Darwin locking themselves in the school bathroom, and thinking they're never gonna get out, Gumball reveals a secret to Darwin that he was responsible for something bad happening to him. And when Darwin is about to reveal a similar secret, the janitor, Rocky, unlocks the bathroom door and frees them, and Gumball spends the entire episode trying to get Darwin to reveal his secrets. Now this is kind of like the painting or the prank because it doesn't focus too hard on a strong plot, but more the humor it can get from the many different ways Gumball tries to get Darwin's secrets. And kinda like the prank, it's a bit hit or miss, but a little bit more on the hit side. There's a lot of laughs with this episode, there's some really creative scenarios thrown in, and there's a fake-out ending that leads me to believe this episode was somewhat inspired by the secret box from SpongeBob SquarePants. In fact, that's the best way to describe this episode, the Amazing World of Gumball's version of the secret box, which honestly still sounds pretty awesome. Not much of a secret here, I like this episode.
Now tell me your secret!
Tell me your secret! Tell me your... Oh, hey, Darwin.
And we followed that up with the sock. Now, kinda like what I felt the prank tried to do for the laziest, I feel this episode was trying to fix the mistakes made in the robot. Because there is a lot of cruel-centered humor in this episode, but a lot of it feels much more well executed. It's about Gumball and Darwin being sent to the school counselor, Mr. Small, to learn a lesson about honesty, because Miss Simeon believes they're lying about their dad eating their homework. Well, yeah, right off the bat, you know that's not gonna be a lie, because that sounds exactly like something Richard would do. Now, this is what I mean when I say the cruel-centered humor feels better executed. Even though you know these two aren't lying, you at least understand why the other characters feel like they are. So, it's not as infuriating as it could be. And also, because these characters aren't all that bright, they start accepting the advice Mr. Small is giving them. but they use it in all the wrong ways, which results in so many funny scenarios that you very quickly forget they're being punished for something they didn't do.
What? I'm trapped down the old abandoned well? Hold on! I'm coming!
And kinda like The Secret, the scenarios are what make this episode. But I personally enjoy the scenarios in this episode a little bit more. Also, when Richard reveals that the boys weren't lying, he does so with what is easily one of my favorite lines from the whole season so far.
Why? Oh, I thought it was gonna make me smart.
That is so stupid that it's just gold. Now, there is a joke ending in this episode that I have a feeling will ruin the episode for some viewers. But it didn't ruin it for me because, in a way, the ending, while unfair for a certain character, is also an indirect result of that character's actions. And for me, that shows there was actual thought put into it, and it makes it easier to accept. It's, in my opinion, one of the few joke endings I've seen that actually fits the theme of the episode, and as a result, actually ends up working. Overall, this is a good episode. I don't think I'd call it perfect, but for what it is, it's watchable, it's enjoyable, and considering what I've been looking at so far in this video, it's something that, no lie, I really needed.
Would it be a good thing or a bad thing if it was on fire?
A bad thing, of course.
It's not on fire.
And with that, we move on to the genius, and this is another episode that I really needed. It's about Darwin getting institutionalized by the government because he got a perfect score on an aptitude test.
So you put clever people in quarantine like there's some sort of contagious pathological disease.
Maybe there's more than one genius in this family.
What he meant was, oh...
I think I just realized where the thinning got its inspiration from. And because Darwin is institutionalized, Gumball tries to make himself smarter so he can get in and help Darwin. And Richard and Nicole, who go completely insane missing Darwin, decide to adopt Rocky after he gets kicked out of his house, and they make him dress up and act just like Darwin.
Are you sure there's nothing else to wear, Mrs. Watterson?
Please, honey. You can call us Mom and Dad.
Now this side plot, while very disturbing, is a lot easier to tolerate because it doesn't take up too much of the episode. And even when it is focused on, it doesn't ever feel like it overstays its welcome or goes overboard. It basically does what The Picnic failed to do. It knew how much creep factor it actually needed. And I think another reason this plot doesn't hurt the episode is because the main plot with Gumball trying to get smart is so damn good. It works in so many out-of-the-box ways to show off how stupid Gumball is and how inept he is at learning. Yet, he still dedicates himself to it for Darwin. In fact, he dedicates himself so much to it that his brain literally tries to quit on him.
I've had enough. I'm off to watch TV.
Hey, where do you think you're going?
I didn't sign up for this. I quit.
That is such a clever idea, and the back and forth Gumball and his brain have that motivates his brain to get smarter. I mean, talk about a legitimate portrayal of you versus your brain. It's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that makes this show deserving of the praise it gets. And the montage of Gumball training his brain is done in a loving homage to the Karate Kid, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. This plot's main message is basically that if you want to improve yourself, and that means anything about yourself, it's going to require hard work, no matter what it is you're trying to improve. And I like that this episode decided to portray that in a fun way, instead of feeling like it's hammering into you how important hard work is, because that has a higher probability of having the reverse effect when you do that. So I really like that they avoided that and portrayed this kind of topic in such a fun way. An overall ingenious and enjoyable episode.
This may take a while.
And now we move on to the Poltergeist. Now, this is only the second episode to feature Mr. Robinson as a main focus, the other one being The Debt, which is easily one of the worst episodes so far. So I guess it's safe to assume this episode couldn't possibly be worse than that. Especially since this staff seems to learn from their mistakes as they go. This episode is about Gumball keeping Mr. Robinson in his attic, which the episode initially wants you to believe is because Gumball kidnapped him.
You do realize what keeping a 50-year-old man in these conditions is called? Love? Kidnapping. And I want nothing more to do with it.
But there's actually a much more innocent and even kind of emotional story behind all of this. Turns out Mr. Robinson and his wife separated, and Mr. Robinson ends up going into a state of depression to where he basically has no reaction to anything. And Gumball and Darwin actually spend the majority of the episode trying everything in their power to cheer him up, including beating themselves silly.
Hey, Mr. Robinson, look at this. It's funny because it hurts. Right, Mr. Robinson?
Considering the debt consisted of Mr. Robinson suffering for absolutely no reason, it's nice to see the writers realize that suffering like this is more enjoyable if the characters themselves are doing it willingly to try and help someone else out. Also, the side plot of this episode is pretty great too. Because Mr. Robinson is living in the attic without the knowledge of Richard and Nicole, Richard starts hearing Mr. Robinson crying out for his ex-wife, making him believe the house is haunted, and he spends a good chunk of the episode trying to catch the ghost, which ends up being at the expense of Nicole.
Richard, what are you doing? Nicole! 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 Where are you? Nicole!
I'm here.
That's another thing that really could have gone south fast, but unlike The Laziest, where Richard felt like he was deliberately trying to be an asshole for virtually no reason, this one feels more inadvertent, and like Richard really is just trying to protect his family, which makes it a lot easier to forgive. And the reveal to why Mr. Robinson's wife leaves him makes perfect sense, considering everything you see involving them up to this point. And when Gumball and Darwin find out what happened, they actually do everything they can to try and bring the two back together. Once again, this episode feels like a rewrite of a past failure, as it makes massive improvements to what it failed with in The Debt. The cruel humor is used in a productive and well-executed way. The mishaps with Richard and Nicole aren't as episode-breaking as they could have been, considering the mishaps actually feel incidental, and not in a flanderized way like Gumball's mishaps with Mr. Robinson in The Debt. And the fact that Gumball and Darwin do something that's truly selfless for a character that's really in need of it is alone something that really lifts this episode up and puts it miles ahead of certain past episodes. And honestly, if the writers can turn something like The Debt into something like this, that's a true testament to the talent that's present in the show. And it gives me hope that the writers can fix other past mistakes that desperately need a second look.
Show yourself, ghost of Mr. Robinson! Hey, what's up, neighbor?
Now we move on to the mustache. Now, I find in kid shows, there are certain topics that need to be talked about. Like, it couldn't be an official kid show unless they do an episode around these topics. And one of those topics is appreciating being a kid. So, this is the Amazing World of Gumball's version of that. It's about Gumball and Darwin not wanting to be kids anymore because they're tired of having their freedom restricted. And they feel as adults, they would have easier lives. And they seem to get their wish as they suddenly start turning into adults. But they find out that the adult life is no walk in the park. Now, there's a lot I like about this episode. For one, I enjoy Richard's brief moments at the start when he actually tries to be responsible.
We really don't want to go to school today.
Why? Are you sick?
Nah, we're just not up for it.
Yeah, school is boring.
But you have to go to school. You're kids. It's what you do.
I don't know, there's something hilarious about a giant man-child trying to be an adult every now and then. Though, I am a bit disappointed that this episode is called The Mustache, yet there's no callback to Richard's badass horseshoe mustache from The Refund. I mean, come on, that seemed kind of ideal to me. Also, Gumball and Darwin's transformation scene is really well done. It uses gross-out humor in a very fun way. Yeah, I'm serious, it found a way to make gross-out humor fun. And when they fully become adults, it leads to a montage that's one of my favorite moments of the series so far. It pokes fun at what kids believe being an adult is like, and does so with a song that is so catchy and hilarious.
We're gonna test drive a car. Say we need a little time to think about it, because we're men. We're gonna pay more for the movies, chop down trees and eat a lot of meat, because we're men.
And probably best of all, it does a great job showing why being an adult and being given all that extra freedom isn't always a good thing, especially if you aren't ready for it.
I can't believe you ate our last piece of candy! Well, I can't believe I'm stuck here with you! I can't believe we're both yelling! I know, we're trying to hide from the landlord! Let's be quiet then! Okay! I wish we were kids again. Me too.
Basically, it's a pretty mature little episode about why it's best to enjoy your time as a kid, and use that time to both prepare for adulthood, but also enjoy the lack of responsibilities. You're gonna be an adult for the majority of your life, and your childhood is only gonna make up a small percent of your life, and it's a percent you're gonna miss the second it's over. And honestly, every now and then, it might be good to get a little taste of adulthood so you can appreciate being kids even more. And this episode, I would say, gives its viewers a nice taste of the adult life while still managing to blend it with the kid-friendly aspects of the show. Even though this topic is frequent in many kid shows, I would say this is one of the better portrayals of it. An episode that's the perfect blend of the adult world and the kid world.
But in the meantime, we can barbecue, buy power shoes, get tattoos, buy our own shoes.
And this has been a nice little streak of fantastic episodes so far. I mean, it's always nice to get to gush over so many episodes all simultaneously. But sadly, all good things must come to an end, because the last episode on this video is The Date. Now, this is not a bad episode by any means, but it's in the same realm as The Kiss and the Goons. It's a very forgettable episode. It's about Gumball thinking he has a date with Penny, and like the end, the episode makes it clear right off the bat that it's a misunderstanding on Gumball's part. And they tell you right away what the misunderstanding actually was.
You want to come round my house this Saturday?
Me? With you? At your place?
You see, it's Mr. Cuddle's funeral.
I don't know though, I think it would have been funnier if they didn't reveal that Penny was inviting him to her pet's funeral right off the bat, because it could have given them more creative things to do with their comedy. But because we know what it was right off the bat, it kinda lets the air out of the balloon when Gumball shows up and realizes what he's actually there for.
So, what do you want to do today?
Today is the funeral.
Oh.
And other than that, there's really not much to talk about. The funeral part is honestly very boring, aside from the reveal that Penny's pet was a tarantula. Gumball preparing for his date is just pretty straightforward, and there's a slight little twist at the end that normally I won't spoil, but I don't know what else it could be that would make it a serviceable twist.
She's never gonna forgive me for that. I'll spend the rest of my life alone and never find happiness.
Yeah, it turns out Penny's pet tarantula isn't actually dead, and it attacks Gumball, which I guess could be pretty hit or miss for a lot of viewers, but for me it was a miss. And it's not because I found it overly cruel, it's because I just found it pretty boring. Like, this episode itself just feels like a filler episode, but compared to the other episodes that feel like filler, this is probably the least bad one. It does have some nice scenes and one or two jokes that might actually give you a good laugh.
You don't need money to show a girl a good time. You think I have money?
No.
Do you see Mom leaving me?
Yeah, every day to go to work and earn money.
For me though, I would just say it's something I'd watch only if there was nothing else on. Certainly not an episode I'll be calling for a second date.
Don't worry, I'm still here for you, Penny.
Thanks, Gumball.
Awesome!
And that'll be it for this video. Now, like I said guys, make sure to vote for the next seasonal review. I'll be doing the last part of my Gumball seasonal review in the next few videos, so the poll will be open until then. and I'm really looking forward to seeing what show you guys want to see me discuss. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.